We left off on the bottom third of page 237. We just had Mr. Yule sign his name with his hand. "What's so interesting?" he asked. "You're left-handed, Mr. Yule," said Judge Taylor. Mr. Yule turned angrily to the judge and said he didn't see what his being left-handed had to do with it, that he was a Christ-fearing man and Atticus Finch was taking advantage of him. Tricking lawyers like Atticus Finch took advantage of him all the time with their tricking ways. He had told them what happened, he'd said it again and again, which he did. Nothing Atticus asked him after that shook his story, that he'd looked through the window, then ran the N-word off, then ran for the sheriff. Again, did not run for the doctor. Atticus finally dismissed him. Mr. Gilmore asked him one more question. "About your writing with your left hand, are you ambidextrous, Mr. Ewell?" "Most positively I'm not. I can use one hand as good as the other. One hand as good as the other," he said, glaring at the defense table. Which we as the reader are supposed to know that that's funny because ambidextrous means you can use both hands, but Bob Ewell does not understand that word, so it's supposed to be like a ja-ja. Jem seemed to be having a quiet fit because he gets it, yada yada yada. He gets a lot of things that are going on right now. He says he was pounding on the balcony rail softly, and once he whispered, "We've got him." I didn't think so. Atticus was trying to show, it seemed to me, that Mr. Ewell could have beaten up Mayella. That much I could follow. If her right eye was blackened and she was mostly beaten on the right side of her face, it would tend to show that it was a left-handed person did it. Sherlock Holmes and Jem Finch would agree. But Tom Robinson could easily be left-handed too. Like Mr. Tate, I imagined a person facing me, went through a swift mental pantomime, and concluded that he must have held her with his right hand and pounded her with his left. I looked down at him. His back was to us, but I could see his broad shoulders and his bull-thick neck. He could easily have done it. I thought Jem was counting his chickens. So here at the end of chapter 17, the question we need to ask ourselves is Jem counting his chickens? Is he confused? Does he think that something is happening that isn't? Or is this a moment that Scout is missing something? If it is, I don't know what she's missing. Yes, it looks like Bob Ewell could have beat up his daughter because he's left-handed, but Tom Robinson could easily be left-handed as well. So what is Jem so excited about? Let's move into chapter 18. But someone was booming again. Mayella Violet Ewell. And a young girl walked to the witness stand. As she raised her hand and swore that the evidence she gave would be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help her God, she seemed somehow fragile looking. But when she sat facing us in the witness chair, she became what she was, a thick-bodied girl accustomed to strenuous labor. In Macomb County, it was easy to tell when somebody bathed regularly, as opposed to yearly libations. Mr. Ewell had a scalded look, as if an overnight soaking had deprived him of protective layers of dirt. His skin appeared to be sensitive to the elements. Mayella looked as if she tried to keep clean, and I was reminded of the row of red geraniums in the Ewell yard. Remember again that in the midst of that garbage dump that they live in, there's a row of flowers that is well cared for as if Miss Maudie had done it, that Mayella takes care of. There's something different about her than the rest of her family. She's clean. She intentionally tries to clean herself. She keeps flowers. Mr. Gilmore asked Mayella to tell the jury in her own words what happened on the evening of November 21st of last year, just in her own words, please. Mayella sat silently. "Where were you at dusk on that evening?" began Mr. Gilmore patiently. "On the porch." "Which porch?" "Ain't but one, the front porch." "What were you doing on the porch?" "Nothing." Judge Taylor said, "Just tell us what happened. You can do that, can't you?" Mayella stared at him and burst into tears. She covered her mouth with her hands and sobbed. Judge Taylor let her cry for a while, then he said, "That's enough now. Don't be afraid of anybody here as long as you tell the truth. All this is strange to you, I know, but you've nothing to be ashamed of and nothing to fear." "What are you scared of?" That's a good question. What is she scared of? Mayella said something behind her hands. "What was that?" asked the judge. "Him," she sobbed, pointing at Atticus. "Mr. Finch?" She nodded vigorously, saying, "Don't want him doing me like he done Papa, trying to make him out left-handed." As if being left-handed is an insult. So again, Mayella does not understand what Atticus is doing, but she knows that he thinks he's figured something out. So she knows that there's something about Bob Ewell being left-handed. She just doesn't know what that thing is. And so she's like, I don't want Atticus to accuse me of being left-handed, which is like kind of funny and also just tragic for this girl who has no idea what's going on. Judge Taylor scratched his thick white hair. It was plain that he had never been confronted with a problem of this kind. "How old are you?" he asked. 19 and a half, Mayella said. And again, I feel like when you say and a half, you're normally like 8 at the most, you know? How old are you? 8 and a half. How old are you? 4 and a half. By the time you're 19, you're just an age. And so Mayella seems to me like childlike. You know, she's 19, but like the fact that she says 19 and a half, she seems like a baby, basically. Judge Taylor cleared his throat and tried unsuccessfully to speak in soothing tones. Mr. Finch has no idea of scaring you, he growled, but if he did, I'm here to stop him. That's one thing I'm sitting up here for. Now you're a big girl, so you just sit up straight and tell us what happened to you. You can do that, can't you? I whispered to Jem. Has she got good sense? Jem was squinting down the witness stand. Can't tell yet, he said. She's got enough sense to get the judge sorry for her, but she might be just... Oh, I don't know. So even Jem isn't sure. Is she trying to get Judge Taylor on her side, or is she actually as childlike as she comes across? Mollified, Mayella gave Atticus a final terrified glance and said to Mr. Gilmer, Well, sir, I was on the porch and he came along and you see there was this old chifforobe, which is like an old, like a wardrobe, like a big wooden wardrobe. Think, you know that singing wardrobe from Beauty and the Beast? Kind of like that. This old chifforobe in the yard, and Papa brought it in to chop up for Kingland, and Papa told me to do it while he was off in the woods, but I wasn't feeling strong enough then, so he came by. Who is he? Mayella pointed to Tom Robinson. I'll have to ask you to be more specific, please, said Mr. Gilmer. The reporter can't put down gestures very well. That and yonder, she said. Robinson. Then what happened? I said, Come here, N-word, and bust out this chifforobe for me. I got a nickel for you. He could have done it easy enough, he could, so he came in the yard and went in the house, and I gave him a nickel, and I turned around, and before I knew it, he was on me. Just run up behind me, he did. He got me around the neck, cussing me and saying dirt. I fought and hollered, but he had me around the neck. He bit me again and again. Mr. Gilmer waited for Mayella to collect herself. She had twisted her handkerchief into a sweaty rope. When she opened it to wipe her face, it was a mess of creases from her hot hands. She waited for Mr. Gilmer to ask another question, but when he didn't, she said, He jumped me on the floor and choked me and took advantage of me. Did you scream? Asked Mr. Gilmer. Did you scream and fight back? Reckon I did. Hollered for all I was worth, kicked and hollered as loud as I could. Then what happened? Well, I don't remember too good, but next thing I knew, Pop was in the room and standing over me hollering, Who done it? Who done it? I sort of fainted, and the next thing I knew, Mr. Tate was pulling me up off the floor and leading me to the water bucket. Apparently, Mayella's recital had given her confidence. But it was not her father's brash kind. There was something stealthy about hers, like a steady-eyed cat with a twitchy tail. You say you fought him off as hard as you could. Fought him tooth and nail, asked Mr. Gilmer. I positively did. Mayella echoed her father. Echoed her father. Saying the same things her father did. You are positive that he took full advantage of you. Mayella's face contorted, and I was afraid that she would cry again. Instead, she said, He done what he was after. Mr. Gilmer called attention to the hot day by wiping his head with his hand. That's all for the time being, he said pleasantly, but you stay there. I expect big bad Mr. Finch has some questions for you. State will not prejudice the witness against counsel for the defense, murmured Judge Taylor primly, at least not at this time. Atticus got up grinning, but instead of walking to the witness stand, he opened his coat and hooked his thumbs into his vest, and he walked slowly across the room to the windows. He looked out, but he didn't seem especially interested in what he saw. Then he turned and strolled back to the witness stand. From long years of experience, I could tell he was trying to come to a decision about something. Miss Mayella, he said, smiling. I won't try to scare you for a while, not yet. Let's get acquainted. How old are you? Said I was 19, said to the judge yonder. Mayella jerked her head resentfully at the bench. So you did, ma'am. You'll have to bear with me, Miss Mayella. I'm getting along, and I can't remember as well as I used to. I might ask you things you've already heard before, but you'll give me an answer, won't you? Good. I could see nothing in Mayella's expression to justify Atticus's assumption that he had secured her wholehearted cooperation. She was looking at him furiously. Won't answer a word you say, long as you keep on mocking me, she said. Ma'am? Asked Atticus, startled. Long as you keep on making fun of me. Judge Taylor said, Mr. Finch is not making fun of you. What's the matter with you? Mayella looked from under lowered eyelids at Atticus, but she said to the judge, as long as he keeps on calling me ma'am and saying Miss Mayella, I don't have to take his sass. I ain't called upon to take it. And I think we should stop there and notice that she thinks Atticus is making fun of her by calling her ma'am and saying Miss Mayella. Atticus is not making fun of her. He's showing her decent human respect. He's treating her like a person. He's calling her ma'am because he's polite, because that's what you do with people. but she thinks he's making fun of him, or her, which tells that she has never had someone treat her well in her entire life. Never in her entire life has someone called her ma'am and been serious. People maybe used it mockingly, jokingly, like if someone said to you, like, oh, you're so smart after you got like a, I don't know, F minus on a test or something, right? Like, that's what she thinks Atticus is doing to her. She thinks he's being sarcastic because never in her life has someone treated her with respect. This moment is heartbreaking. Atticus resumed his stroll over the windows and let Judge Taylor handle this one. Judge Taylor was not the kind of figure that ever evoked pity, but I did feel a pang for him as he tried to explain. It's just Mr. Finch's way, he told Mayella. We've done business in this court for years and years, and Mr. Finch is always courteous to everybody. He's not trying to mock you, he's trying to be polite. That's just his way. The judge leaned back. Atticus, let's get on with these proceedings and let the record show the witness has not been sassed, her views to the contrary. I wondered if anybody had ever called her ma'am or Miss Mayella in her life. Probably not, as she took offense to routine courtesy. What on earth was her life like? I soon found out. I would call this a tough question by Scout right here. I think Scout, this is a moment of like deep insight by Scout, where Scout actually realizes like no one has ever called her ma'am seriously. No one has ever showed her courtesy before. What on earth was her life like? Oh, I think that is a powerful question by Scout. You say you're 19, Atticus resumed. How many sisters and brothers have you? He walked from the window back to the stand. 7, she said, and I wondered if they were all like the specimen I'd seen the first day I started school. You the eldest? The oldest? Yes. How long's your mother been dead? Don't know. Long time. Did you ever go to school? Read and write as good as Papa yonder. Mayella sounded like a Mr. Jingle in a book I had been reading. How long did you go to school? 2 year, 3 year, dunno. Slowly but surely I began to see the pattern of Atticus's questions. From questions that Mr. Gilmore did not deem sufficiently irrelevant or immaterial to object to, Atticus was quietly building up before the jury a picture of the Ewells' home life. The jury learned the following things. Their relief check was far from enough to feed the family, and there was strong suspicion that Papa drank it up anyway. He sometimes went off in the swamp for days and came home sick. The weather was seldom cold enough to require shoes, but when it was, you could make dandy ones from strips of old tires. The family hauled its water in buckets from a spring that ran out at one end of the dump. They kept the surrounding area clear of trash, and it was everybody for himself as far as keeping clean went. If you wanted to wash, you hauled your own water. The younger children had perpetual colds and suffered from chronic ground itch. There was a lady who came around sometimes and asked Mayella why she didn't stay in school. She wrote down the answer. With 2 members of the family reading and writing, there was no need for the rest of them to learn. Papa needed them at home. So in addition to the home life that is, I think, hard to read about, like horrifying, tires as shoes and etc., there's something that I want to point out, which is Mayella is 19. She has 7 brothers and sisters, and her mother has been dead so long that she is not sure how long that is. Now, we don't know this for sure, but an inference, a logical seeming guess that we could make is if Mayella is 19, 7 kids are younger than her, so that means there are 7 kids who are younger than 19, and yet Mayella doesn't really remember her mom. Some of those kids might be Mayella's. Again, we do not know that for sure, but there is like this implication or this question of, has Bob Ewell been abusing his daughter in this way? Which would, it's horrifying. It's sickening. It makes my stomach to hurt to think about it, of incest and rape and it's awful. And again, we don't know that for sure. And yet that's one of those questions that's kind of hanging where it's like, is that the truth of what's happening in her life? I want to talk about this more when I'm back in person, but that's kind of a question that we, horrifyingly have to ask ourselves. Miss Mayella, said Atticus in spite of himself, a 19-year-old girl, you must have friends. Who are your friends? The witness frowned as if puzzled. Friends? Yes. Don't you know anyone near your age or older or younger, boys or girls, just ordinary friends? Mayella's hostility, which had subsided to grudging neutrality, flared again. You making fun of me again, Mr. Finch? Atticus let her question answer his. Do you love your father, Miss Mayella? Was his next. Love him? What you mean? I mean, is he good to you? Is he easy to get along with? He does tolerable, except when... Except when? Mayella looked at her father, who was sitting with his chair tipped against the railing. He sat up straight and waited for her to answer. Except when nothing, said Mayella. I said he does tolerable. Mr. Yule leaned back again. So what's going on there? Seems like he maybe is controlling some of her answers. Except when he's drinking? Asked Atticus so gently that Mayella nodded. Does he ever go after you? How you mean? When he's riled. Has he ever beaten you? Mayella looked around down at the court reporter up at the judge. Answer the question, Miss Mayella, said Judge Taylor. My pa's never touched a hair on my head. In my life, she declared firmly. He never touched me. Atticus's glasses had slipped a little, and he pushed them up his nose. We've had a good visit, Miss Mayella, and now I guess we'd better get to the case. You say you asked Tom Robinson to come chop a... what was it? Chifferobe. A old dresser full of drawers in one side. Was Tom Robinson well known to you? What do you mean? I mean, did you know who he was, where he lived? Mayella nodded. I know who he was. He passed the house every day. Was this the first time you asked him to come inside the fence? Mayella jumped slightly at that question, which is a weird response. Atticus was making his slow pilgrimage to the windows. As he had been doing, he would ask a question then look out, waiting for an answer. He did not see her involuntary jump, but it seemed to me that he knew she had moved. He turned around and raised his eyebrows. He began again. Yes, it was. Didn't you ever ask him to come inside the fence before? She was prepared now. I did not. I certainly did not. And that's where I'm going to stop for 1 second because I'm going to go make myself some tea. So this is the end of the first video. There will be a second one.